So, this is happening. I've noticed a sentiment within the comments section of quite a few of my videos, hoping against hope that the MonsterVerse and the Godzilla series overall does not get involved in divisive politics. Not that people don't want their movies to actually be about anything, but they'd rather the movies weren't about all the things that are causing so many divisions amongst fandoms these days. Stuff like what's driving a wedge between fans with Star Wars or Marvel Comics or whatever. So, the existence of this article is somewhat disheartening. Let me preface this a little because I don't want anyone to take anything here out of context. In the Total Film article that I briefly touched upon in a previous video, there was a segment of it where Vera Farmiga spoke about her character, and she was talking about her perspective of playing a female character in a Godzilla movie. And one of the things she said was that she thought it was interesting that her character is the one who came up with a method of dealing with the monsters that's non-violent, and how interesting it is that it takes a woman's touch to do that. But also mentioned how this movie is about the relationship between a mother and a daughter, and in passing said that Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019 might be the first Godzilla movie ever to pass the Bechdel test. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Bechdel test is, that's a little thought experiment that originated, I believe it was back in the 80s, that says the way you judge a female character in film, and whether or not it's a good female character, is that the movie has to meet one of three criteria. Actually, all three of these following criteria. It has to have more than one named female character in a primary role. Those two female characters have to talk to each other, and what they talk about has to be about something other than the male characters. Now, on the one hand, it's an interesting thought experiment, sure. You apply it to different movies and you might eventually come to realize, oh, well, what do you know? There are a lot of movies out there with only one female character, or where the female characters are only talking about what the male characters are doing. But at the same time, I think it's kind of been blown out of proportion. Because, I mean, there are plenty of really horrible works of fiction out there that pass the Bechdel test, yet they are terrible. In some cases, they are outright sexist against women. And, of course, I think that applying the Bechdel test kind of does a disservice to strong female characters who are singular. I mean, it kind of, in an indirect way, says that you can only judge a female character by the presence of other female characters around them. That character may be the best character in the whole movie, but it doesn't count if she's the only one. But anyway, people have blown it out of proportion. It comes up every once in a while, and generally it's just become kind of an annoyance for a lot of people who think there's a bit more to the subject than just that. But anyway, Vera Farmiga brought it up, and it wasn't really meant to be inflammatory. Let's be clear on that. Barely takes up any of that Total Film article. It wasn't really said as some sort of screw men, women are the way of the future kind of thing, or anything else that would be considered infuriating or inflammatory. She was just saying it. So it's rather disheartening that SyFy Wire ran an article by Jacob Aller here, which took that very brief snippet from the Total Film article and made it the talking point of this entire feature right here. You can see right here, that's the headline. That's what attention is being drawn to. Looks like it could only have been avoided for so long. Now look, we know for a fact that it is an incorrect notion to assume that Godzilla King of the Monsters is the first Godzilla movie to pass the Bechdel test. There have been many others. An exact count is still being tallied by people, but I've heard arguments that there's anywhere from 8 to 15 Godzilla movies prior to 2019 where the Bechdel test is passed. So it wouldn't really be the first, it would only be the most recent. Vera Farmiga, okay, she's the one who initially said it. She's clearly not correct. Means she doesn't really know that much about the Godzilla series, but is that really a surprise? I mean, there are plenty of actors out there who get involved in big franchises without really knowing or caring much about them. How many times in the last 20 years have we heard actors say, "Oh, I signed on to this superhero movie so I could be in something my kids could watch"? I mean, that says it all right there. So, I don't necessarily hold Vera Farmiga at fault here. I can't say the same for Mr. Aller. He is clearly taking this very brief part of the Total Film article and blowing it way out of proportion. And whether he's doing it knowingly or not, that is going to be something that can potentially drive a wedge if we respond to it poorly. We've seen it enough times by now to know how it works. Somebody who has an agenda to push sets their sights on something that they know is going to be really popular, or at least stands a chance of being very popular. They sneak in and they say something to the effect of, hey, guess what? This movie is about what I believe, and what I believe is right, and if you don't believe me, you're wrong. Then all they have to do is sit back and wait for someone to freak out about it. And that's what happens. They form the snowball, but then they wait for someone else to push it down the hill. That's what happened with Star Wars. That's what happened with Star Trek. That's what happened with Ghostbusters. That's what happened with Captain Marvel. And I know a lot of people have been worried about it possibly happening with Godzilla at some point. I don't necessarily think this is the canary in the coal mine, but it could be. But the thing is, we have to keep in mind, there's been really no evidence suggesting that Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019 is going to be going for this kind of divisive modern political angle. It looks like it's going to be pretty standard fare for a Godzilla movie in terms of what it is about. I mean, the opinions of just one actor in that regard aren't necessarily meant to be taken that out of proportion. And certainly the words of someone who had no involvement in making the movie at all matter even less. But in that regard, I do think that what we need to do right now is behave in a way counter to what is expected. The way we have to respond is basically to not give this article more attention than it deserves. We know it's wrong, and there are plenty of people pointing out how it is wrong. But we cannot resort to the sort of things that I'm sure people with agendas would be expecting. We cannot attack, we cannot bully. That's what they want. What we should do is we should present the facts. Facts are what ultimately win in the long run. This article appeared over the weekend, and I deliberately waited until Monday, after the weekend was over, to come up with a video for it, because I wanted to see just where it was going. And for the most part, it seems as if people are behaving in a relatively civil way, but there are a few who are taking it a little too personally. The ultimate fact of the matter is, if we react too strongly, the Godzilla fandom will be divided in a way that makes the divide caused by the anime trilogy look minor in comparison. It would be comparing a crack in the sidewalk to the Grand Canyon. At the moment, I don't see anything worth getting too fired up over. This is clearly just a ploy. Someone saw that there's an upcoming movie that looks like it's going to be very, very popular, and they saw a quote made by one of the actors within it, and they're trying to generate publicity just to get their own attention. That's all this is. Ultimately, no one benefits from giving it too much attention, except for the person who made it. And he clearly doesn't deserve that attention if this is how he intends to get it. So, My advice would be to just let this matter drop, because it's ultimately not going to get us anywhere. Now, if when we finally see Godzilla King of the Monsters, it does turn out to be laced with current political drama, then we will have to open up the discussion. I don't really think that's going to be the case, but if it is, a reassessment of this advice will be required. For now, though, it doesn't seem like that is going to be the case, so it doesn't really seem like it'll matter. This is a non-issue. This is making a mountain out of a molehill. Recognize that it is a molehill, and just leave it alone. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.